Here we are with another 3-player match of Empires of Aether featuring a brand new player. It's Joe, check yo pockets. Blue Shadow Stan the man himself. And the biggest Yeet, the water player, coming off of a win. Can he do the back-to-back? Something that has only been done thus far by the Zenaires. Perhaps we've got another dynasty forming before us. Let's see what happens. We've got our board here. They make their bans. I believe it was Blood, Arcane, and Earth, if I'm not mistaken, banned this game. And David, the biggest Yeet, gets to pick first. And he takes water and throws it up here in this corner. Not a bad pick, right? You've got 2 easy access lakes, good access to some building materials here. And of course, pretty quick and easy between the 2 stronger boss tiles here. Out of all of his choices, it's probably the best for water, right? You've got lakes 3 lakes that are pretty easy access up here in this corner. Maybe he had a different reason for what he was going with there, but his river ends up going like so. Covering up those 2 forest tiles, so getting rid of a couple of weaker tiles. I like that. The only thing I don't like about this placement is that if you start on the coastline with your river, that's 1 tile, closer to your base and you really, needed to be when you were using that river, right? If he makes the river here and here, well, then he's instant star tile on turn 1. But he decides to go here, just wants to get rid of those weaker tiles. And then we'll take a look at his abilities to see why that's not that big of a hindrance at all. But I think there's other things you could do. You could even send it, closer to your opponent down over here and, maybe be aggressive with them in the early game. But either way, starting at this position or this position is a little bit weaker, in my opinion. So if I'm playing water, I'm always putting it on one of those 2 tiles, unless there's just a very obvious choice for what you want to do. You can't interfere with the landmarks or the boss tiles in the first part of your river. And then in the 3-player board, they only have access to 2 river tiles. So not really, a huge deal. But still, I might have changed it a little bit. Then we got Justin, who's been trying to go for Blood, trying to get him a win. He ends up going with Nature here after Blood is banned. And a pretty easy choice here. Sitting Nature down here at the bottom. The 2 forests up here directly adjacent to the capital tile. That might have been another good choice because he's got another rainforest right after that. With the potential to use his Tarzan ability to get to this rainforest over here before his opponent can even respond to that. But obviously water took that corner away. And so it's Nature getting down here, down south. I like it. Forest to the adjacent to the capital tile. And then a couple of rainforests, quick and easy access to it. And of course the ability to make more forests. So I like it. And then Joe says he's an aggressive man. Picks the most aggressive nation in the game. Picking Lightning. Lots of food up here. Good balance of building materials as well. Let's see how Joe, check your pockets, plays it. We'll take a look at their abilities. We already have their lineup. The players at the table really help Joe out here as he is, fairly new to the game. But also, Lightning has really settled into, some standard abilities. The only one that I think is not, completely necessary now is the Shocking Development Tier 2 card here. His Tier 1's pretty obvious choice. I don't think there's situations that are... I don't think it's better to take any other ability in practically any situation. Unless you just have a plethora of building materials next to your base. Then maybe you don't need Thunderclap and maybe you can take Mjolnir or something like that to buff up your general. But aside from that, Tier 2, always going to take Blitzkrieg Warfare and Thunderbolt. Although Thunderbolt is fairly situational. But going up against Nature with its slightly enhanced defensive fortifications, it's a really good thing to take. And then Tier 3, really, really powerful abilities. But we're really hoping to stay in this Tier 2 window here. And then we've got Nature. Not too many choices here. Only had to cut, 2 different abilities. One from the Tier 1, one from the Tier 2. And his abilities are straightforward. They're what you take every single game. The only one that's a little bit flexible here is we can purchase Rainforest for half price. Well, he's got 2 Rainforests that are within spitting distance of his capital. If you only have 1, then there's no point in taking this card, right? You might as well take the other Tier 1 that you got access to. But he's got 2 here. And so within just a couple of turns, he can own 2 Rainforests for a grand total of 6 and 6 as opposed to just owning 1. So that's, I think a pretty solid take here. And then Tier 2, he takes the Archers and the Trees, but you're going to take that every single time. Nature is not the most aggressive nation, but it allows you to excel with your spawned armies in Tier 2 to then attack them with those soldiers that they weren't expecting you to have. And then Water, David has changed up his abilities just a little bit. He won on Water last game, decides to take it again, but the abilities are slightly different. We've got both the field and the water double resource buildings, access to them in tier 1, right? Because he's got a field and a lake adjacent to his capital, essentially. So really, really good economy there. And then he did take the wind of that river get longer in the tier 2. Can't remember what he took instead in the last game, but I think this is going to be really, really powerful because this is a star tile. The other text, aside from just extending the river, is that it will drown any units on that tile. So let's say that, nature or some situation that lightning gets all the way over here to the swamp, water can eliminate any threat that is on that swamp tile and then take it for himself. So I like that play here, and maybe that's why he placed the river exactly why he did in the beginning. And then we've got the Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls. I think with how short the map is, that is a must-take in every 3-player game situation. Very, very good here. We can convert a desert into an oasis, and he's got pretty close access to a desert right here. Nature's got a lot of map manipulation. Lightning doesn't really have any. So let's see if this desert sticks around. We'll check that out in the early game. And then we've also got the Where Did the Water Go, so we can disrupt economy and also the board state for certain people. That being said, this ability right here, we are only able to convert lakes, rivers, and fields to deserts. Right? Nature's got 2 fields here. Maybe this is what water is looking at. So we can definitely cripple an economy here. The only downside to that is nature has 3 tiles that they can convert into forests just by the abilities that they are taking. And so if I see that tier 3 ability is a threat to me at some point, then I'm converting this desert, this swamp, and one of these 2 fields into forests just before I even make my first turn. That's something that I'm planning kind of ahead. And so that is our lineup. Who do you got right now before we jump into the action? Is it the newcomer, Check Your Pockets Joe, Blue Shadow on nature, or David the Biggest Yeet on water? Who you got? Throw it down in the comments, and we'll jump into the action right away. Here we are jumping into the action, kicking it off with Joe. First time Aether player on the Lightning Nation. Let's see how he settles in. And a juicy turn 1 advantage card drawn. I have a degree in geography where he can convert a tile that he owns to any non-landmark tile. So that desert adjacent to his capital, no longer a desert whatsoever. He's converting that baby into a fertile rainforest. So for only 3 building materials, he's getting a rainforest. That's a very, very juicy turn 1 opener. We've seen the Zine Airs, the optimal 10-10 open, but have we ever seen the new Joe open? Check your pockets, baby, because I think a rainforest is in there. So opening up with that rainforest, his general is moving to that rainforest. Lightning can also take advantage of not having to build a barracks here. And in doing so, he'll be able to purchase the mountain, or the field, actually. So let's see what he goes here. Right, we've explained, a little bit about how the game works. Will he choose to go for the food, to maintain that aggressive nature of the Lightning Nation? Looks like he's going mountain here. So he is purchasing the soldier from that capital, and he's going to buy the mountain instead of the rainforest. So he's going to prioritize the building materials. So let's see if he goes for a fairly conservative, just tile, economic-driven approach to the game. And if that's the case, is Lightning the Nation for Mr. Check Your Pockets here? All right, then we go to Nature, who pulls the Mini Bazaar Advantage card here. May swap up to 5 food for BM or vice versa. Nature's got a lot of access to food here. Nature taking that tier 1 passive that allows them to purchase a rainforest for the price of a forest. So he's purchasing a rainforest and a forest on turn 1. Pretty juicy. Bringing him to 1-1 at the end of that turn. Lots of economy right there in turn 1 for the Nature Nation. I really like that when you've got access to that adjacent rainforest. Really, really good. And we go to water. David, who just recently won on the Water Nation, gets the Too Much Baggage card. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he got this in the last game as well. Or maybe it was used on him. Looks like he's going to go for a nice juicy Zine Airs open here. Yep. The 10-10 start, purchasing a mountain and a lake. Water really not wanting to fall into that trap. Not getting enough building materials to expand. An unfortunate first weather event. The winter is coming weather event. Food is cut for the next turn. It says 3 turns on this card. It is only for 1 turn. We don't want to slow the game down too much. That'd be kind of miserable. So we go to Joe, the Lightning player, into turn 2, who prioritized the building materials in turn 1 anyway. He gets the budget cuts, the ability to shut down one enemy barracks for their next turn. Okay. Not sure if he produced enough to get this second Rainforest here, but imagine if he can get 2 Rainforests by turn 2 and a Star Tile, and he does. He's got enough for it. He's sitting at 10 and 9 at the beginning of this turn, so easily gets to the Rainforest. And so it looks like he's just going to purchase that Rainforest and then bow out of this turn. The reason why Nature flashed that card at the bottom of our screen just a second ago is because that is a part of their passive. If they purchase a Forest or a Rainforest, they get to draw an advantage card. So we'll get to see what those 2 additional advantage cards were because he purchased a Rainforest and a Forest in that first turn. So Lightning is going to purchase that second Rainforest, a Star Tile, and then continuing to move that General. And he puts a resource building on that Rainforest for food. So really prioritizing. Looks like he's shifting towards that food approach for Lightning. And look how he's shifting. He's shifting in Water's direction. Is he going to try to go aggressive? So Nature's sitting at 8 and 7, and he does have 2 additional advantage cards. He's got the Well-Fed Mercenaries combat card. For 10 food, you can add 3 soldiers to a battle. He also has the Impressive Yield, so he can double the resource produced by a tile. So he utilizes his the Tarzan Tier 1 ability card to move his general from the forest to this Rainforest, and he can purchase that Star Tile for 3 and 3, gaining him yet another advantage card. So he draws one at the beginning of that turn. He gets the one that forces his opponent to throw away all their advantage cards. I know for a fact that he had this one in the last game. Utilized it against David, who was also playing Water back then, so he might have a little bit of repeats going on there. And then he also drew the one-way portal card. So he can teleport his units to a landmark tile, so to that temple or to the Dragon's Lair at some point. So in this 3-player version of the map, I do think the southern portion of the map has a little bit of an advantage in terms of star tiles. So it is really on the onus of the corner players to put pressure on their opponents here, because he's very easily going to move into these 2 star tiles. Can't purchase both this turn, I don't think. No, he does. He's got enough to purchase that field. So turn 2, we could see, someone owning 2 star tiles, which is pretty nuts. But instead, he does go for a resource building on the Rainforest for building materials, which I think is the better move. There's no rush on those star tiles. He's going to have access to them. And he goes ahead and activates Impressive Yield on that Rainforest with the resource building. So a good, juicy amount of building materials for him there to enhance his expansion. He also trains a soldier at the end of that turn. Nature naturally produces a lot of food with that forest enhanced food production. And so Rainforest, yeah, pretty good thing to emphasize building materials there. Water's going to pull the Vegetarian Vegan Advantage card. Not too good for them because building materials is where they are starving typically in the early game, and they've got a plethora of food. So not the best card here. Let's see if he can find a cheeky way of utilizing it. Water's sitting at 6 and 5 after his 10-10 opener. Activates the Vegetarian card right away. And he's going to use that to purchase just 1 soldier for 2 BM. So he's sitting at 6 and 3 now, which will allow him to purchase both of those river tiles. And he can also purchase a resource building, so pretty good. I like that. Really, really good, efficient use of his resources. He also activates the Fertile Crescent Tier 1 ability, which allows him to get a second resource building on 1 lake tile. So that lake tile alone is producing 9 food a turn for Water. Very, very good for their economy in the early game. That's a lot of soldiers that can be floated down that river here pretty soon. So food kind of cut in half in this next turn, so we're going to see the food numbers not go up by too much. Nature with a really early uptake on advantage cards. It looks like, looking at the rest of the board, it looks like that advantage is, just about out. They only get the extra advantage card when they purchase forests, not when they create new ones with their abilities or when they take them via combat. So it looks like that passive is only going to net him 3 advantage cards, but in the early game, we know how massive that can be. Imagine how unfortunate it would be if the weather event that causes you to toss advantage cards would happen right now. We get the East off-limits weather event. No nation can travel in the eastern direction. Water is pretty safe from any enemy advances from the Lightning Nation or the Nature Nation this turn. I think in the 3-player map, this is a massive, massive change here. Lightning gets to draw 2 advantage cards here and take the better of the 2 options courtesy of their nation's passive. Gets the announced spontaneous construction, a new ability, or the Tuscan Raider advantage card. That wasn't a very good Tusken Raider sound, was it? We'll give it another go at some point. Let's see what Joe opts for here, the new player. I don't see any... He converted that desert that he had next to his capital into a rainforest, so yeah, spontaneous construction is the play. And he says, as an act of peace, he's going to activate its effect for himself and David the Water Nation. So the Water Nation that he seems to be moving in the direction of, he's not focusing on nature right now. It's an act of peace, he says. They get 2 resource buildings. One's going to go on his mountain, one's going to go on his rainforest. And the other is going to go for water. But he only has 1 tile that a resource building can go on, and that's the mountain. So let's see. If he chose Justin, it could have gone on the rainforest and the forest. So maybe it was an act of peace, or maybe it was a disguise, because it would have been giving 2 free resource buildings to nature as opposed to water. Who knows? We'll have to interview him at some point in the future to see what he was thinking there. Okay, so he really can only move into the Nature Nation here if he's going to go anywhere. Can't move east. Unfortunately, he feels compelled to move his general sort of backwards on the map. We've said this many times before. This is not something that you want to have to do, but he feels compelled to do so. And so he loses sort of a central position on the board. He's going to train an additional soldier there. And he can move to that field there, but he can't move to the lake directly adjacent to his capital either. Unfortunate. But he kind of loses a middle position on the board. Not such a big deal. It doesn't... Lightning's not going against other aggressive nations, so he's... I understand he's a new player, so he's not feeling too much pressure there. But he shouldn't either. The nations aren't really capable of doing so. So he puts a resource building on the field in his turn. Justin gets essentially the second version of the advantage card that he already has. So he's got lots of teleportation to landmark tiles available. Interesting. 2 effects that essentially do the same thing. Just one does it for all of his units and one only does it for 1 unit. Not the best combination. Sitting at 6 and 12 here, he can buy that field star tile. Is that correct, though? Or does Justin move into the Water Tribe's territory here, purchasing this desert? He purchases this lake instead, so that's going to use all of his food. He can still afford that desert and fortify it if he wanted to. So he activates his mini bazaar, swaps BM for food, so that he can also buy that field star tile. Pretty juicy, really good use of that early advantage card. Now owns 2 star tiles just at turn 3. And if you'll see, he's just 2 tiles away from accessing that swamp tile. Pretty good. Blue Shadow ends at 1 and 0. And it goes to the biggest Yeet, coming off a win. Gets the self-trading card. Basically the mini bazaar, but we can go for an unlimited amount. If you got 50 food, you could make that 50 BM if you wanted to. A more powerful version. Too much baggage is activated and used on the Nature Nation, and a really easy choice here because he's got 2 advantage cards that essentially do the same thing, so he's going to discard the weaker version. Pretty good. I love Justin is saying, oh, there's no problem, just have a better version of this card, and David actually knows so much about the game that he knows exactly what card he's talking about. It's pretty funny to listen to interactions like that when you're sitting at the table. So water was in the safe position this game, and the reason why nature couldn't move into that desert, so the reason why his move was really, really good, is we forgot about the weather event. He can't move east, so that desert was inaccessible to him that turn. So water really needs to take advantage here and take that swamp. Who knows, nature could put a lot of pressure here. Nature will beat water in the early to mid game, but water very quickly can turn it around. In the late game, water is unstoppable to nature. Moves west and goes into that field, puts a resource building on it. He also has the big pharma tier 1, so he's got a lot of resource buildings for food. That's a lot of troops that can come out of these water tiles. Puts a barracks on the capital. Already had it, sorry, trains a soldier at his capital. Currently sitting at 3 and 3. Does buy that swamp like we said he probably should. Every star tile now owned by turn 3. Go to turn 4. Water has a massive amount of food. Wow. really good economy across the board here. We get the Clear Skies weather event. Lightning a little bit weaker for 2 turns. Don't think he's poising too much for an attack. Like we said, brand new player at the table, might not know what his capabilities are, but I'm just saying, if his general didn't move backwards, if he moved from that lake to actually this rainforest, because that was in the western direction, he can poise to take this field, right, using his tier 1 ability. And nature has no units behind it to back it up. You're taking a star tile and you're taking food away from nature. Pretty good in the early game. Might have been the play. We go to Lightning in turn 4. We get the Leader Impotence Advantage card. Very, very good in many situations, especially in the early game. There's no Blood Nation in this game, so it's not massively impactful, but still can be very powerful in these early game little scuffles. Lightning just prioritizing that economy. He seems to be playing a very control-based game, going for as much land acquisition as he can, which for a lot of nations, that is the move. I would probably say to him, maybe in the future, Lightning's not for you, man. More of a mid-game to late-game kind of player. Just based on how he's moving his units around the board. Only owns 2 soldiers and his general, which really he's about on pace with everyone else at the table. So it goes to nature. Gets the extensive training advantage card, which will double an army's attack. Nature, yeah, definitely moving into Water's direction. Pretty confident he can win that early game, but Water's put a lot of food on it. He activates Arboretum, converting that desert into a forest tile. The reason why he does this is that forests have better defense. When you put defensive fortifications on a forest, it adds 15 instead of 10 to your defense, so it's a little more powerful there. And he goes ahead, fortifies it with 2 fortifications there. So he is staking his flag. He is just 1 tile away from encroaching into Water's territory. He has made it known that that is where he is going to prioritize. Purchases the field and the desert. Lots of economy coming out for nature. Lots of economy. I'll be seeing a tier 2 and perhaps a really quick tier 3 the next few turns. Trains 3 soldiers out of the gate, so nature now has the most soldiers on the map by a fairly large margin. Biggest Yeet, the Water Tribe at 22 and 8. Can't go tier 2. Very close. Gets one of the new advantage cards. That is a catapult for people. For a total of 20 building materials, we could eliminate 3 armies. Activate self-trading here. By trading 7 food, he goes to 15 and 15. And he now goes to tier 2. Really, really nice. What's he going to do with this? Purchases the lake directly adjacent to that nature. Doesn't have that many. He's at 0 and 3 now after doing that. Can't really fortify what he's got. Activates Call in the Navy on turn 4. Counting up the free soldiers he's getting. Says get 16 soldiers on turn 4. Wow, wow, wow. With all this food acquisition in the early game, that's pretty huge. So, Water definitely going for that 10 army win condition. Spreading out all of his armies, he's learned his lesson. I know for a fact he has seen cards that have wiped out entire militaries before, and he has learned his lesson from that. So he uses his remaining 3 building materials for a defensive fortification on that lake. Really not worried about this swamp, and I like what the potential play is here. He's got the tier 2 ability. When did that river get longer? If nature is to take this, he can just extend the river, and it will drown any units on the tile, and then he can just take it for free, essentially. So a really good play to fortify the lake as opposed to the swamp. I like that. So really, really quick turn 4. Going to turn 5. The game is moving, ladies and gentlemen.